you feel like you had a relationship with that Tasmanian tiger?
I think that what happens in the quest to find it, the character starts to identify with it clearly.
Yeah. I watched some of the video, and it was almost spiritual watching this animal that was destroyed.
It's like a little artifact of something. It's true.
And what about hunting? Are you a vegetarian? Did you feel comfortable hunting in the movie?
You know, the stuff in the movie, we didn't kill anything that wasn't already dead. Like some of the corpses and things, they were taken from, licensed kangaroo hunters. It wasn't like we were shooting animals. We didn't kill any animals. They were already dead.
That's good.
Did you have any background as a hunter? I come from a family of hunters, so the movements look very natural.
No, in fact, when I was a kid, I grew up in Wisconsin. Deer hunting is very big there. And during deer hunting season, it was a real father-son ritual that you'd go on deer hunting, and then at the end of that weekend, you'd have that buck on the hood of your car, and you'd go up and down the main drag, beeping your horn. It was really kind of primitive.
Very much.
Yeah. My father didn't hunt, and I would be left there. I would be the only boy in the class for about a week, because they'd all get, it was so much of the culture, they'd all get permission to leave for father-son bonding, so I'd sit there with all the girls. It was nice when I got older,
Was that inspired acting? Sorry.
What's that?
Was that week? Is that the week you decided to become an actor?
It's funny, yeah, something like that.
I was wondering, what surprised you the most about filming in that part of Australia? And also, can you compare and contrast your experience of working in the jungle to this movie and, say, a movie like Antichrist, where you were actually being hunted? You were the hunter, so...
There's a lot of questions there.
Well, the part about
Tasmania, the weather was really volatile. It could be snowing and really cold, and 2 hours later it could be sunny and warm. I mean, a lot had to do with elevation, but we were moving around a lot. So the weather was brutal, and obviously, particularly for the sequences when I'm out in nature, I'm playing scenes with the weather, I'm playing scenes with nature. It's a powerful thing when you're filming, because you can't control it, so you have to be flexible, and you have to invent things, and you know the story you want to tell, but you have to make adjustments all the time. So it has all the energy and curiosity and problems of an expedition. So I'm out there with a small crew. So on some level, it kind of mirrors the hunt for the tiger.
And could you compare and contrast your jungle experience? I know
so different. I mean, I've been in the jungle a lot through the years. Jungles, when you really get down to it, they're all the same. They're, nature gone wild.
I had a question for you, actually, about Wild at Heart, which is one of my personal all-time favorite movies of all time. So Bobby Peru was, really left a major mark on my psyche as a viewer. And I was just curious about your experiences working with David Lynch and developing that character, and how a part that was kind of just a section of the movie really had a major impact on the film. And
I'll try to be brief, because I really want to talk about that a lot.
Yeah.
I agree with you. It was a special role for me. The character came from the teeth, from the dentures that I wore, and the costume I wore. It was beautifully written. David is an artist. He creates a complete world, and when you enter that world, if you do it with an open heart, open mind, everything has a logic. I don't want to say, it's magical. Sometimes you have to do nothing. You just have to get out of the way and let the character do its thing. And it was sort of magical in that case.
Yeah.
I can honestly say I didn't stress or research or do anything for that. I just sort of showed up, and it was a perfect situation. And it triggered some sort of fantasy of mine that could fuel the fuel the soul of that character.
Willem,
Yeah.
I'd like to ask about 444.
Good.
Because I thought it was a really powerful film.
Good.
And I wanted to ask you about your choices, because you wavered between being really calm and accepting the fact that it was over to like freaking out.
Mhm.
And I wanted to know like how you prepared yourself for something like how you would react to the end of the world. Like what was that experience like for you?
You know, in the basic setup, there's the convention that we've accepted it. And we have a scenario and we have scripted, a lot of it's very scripted, but there are islands of script. And I have to get from A to B. I have to connect the dots sometimes. And there, I sometimes emotionally had to make huge leaps. So it opened the door to a certain kind of reflection on the situation in an active way. So it was all playing the story, really. It was all about getting on the train. Choices don't happen, I think. I don't consciously make choices, they're sort of intuitive. It's really about applying yourself to the actions, and then you react to them. And then if that's a choice, I suppose it's a choice, but it's not a conscious choice.
It's not a conscious choice.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it all worked. It was very
Okay.
powerful. Did you get this part because you're old friends with Abel? I mean, did he come to you with this in mind?
He came to me and said, look, I want to do this thing, told me the rough setup, and I said, absolutely. I mean, I've worked with him twice before, and I really like Abel. He's a very underrated filmmaker, and he's a real self-starter. And if you look through his work, we're not just talking The Funeral, we're not just talking about Bad Lieutenant. He's made lots of things, and I think people owe him a lot. But he's never had that kind of a studio affiliation, or he hasn't got much help through the years. But he's a guy that makes a lot out of nothing, and I appreciate that. He's a real, he's very heroic. People focus sometimes on his wild character, but they're missing the point.
Yeah.
Well, he also draws a lot of great talent. I mean, he gets so many good people. Obviously.
Sometimes yes, sometimes
yourself
no.
and,
Sometimes he
Christopher Walken.
Yeah.
He gets
absolutely.
Harvey Keitel. He's
Yeah.
worked with a lot of great names. Yeah.
Because he's the real deal.
His reputation, he has a reputation and a weight to his work. I think that people in the film community understand.
Right.
Anyone that's a film lover understands, his sort of impact on the history of modern cinema, in my opinion.
Yeah.
I do believe that.
I was wondering, when you talked about the choices that Abel made, when you first saw 444, what were some things that stood out for you in terms of because there have been other movies, apocalyptic movies that have been set in New York City.
Right.
And I was wondering, for this particular story, when you saw the movie for the first time, what stood out for you?
It was a very lean shoot, and it was a very lean cut. I mean, the editor did a lot of beautiful things because you're dealing with a lot of stuff that isn't there on the day, because you have all this stuff with the TVs and some montage sequences that I wasn't really. I was there for some of them, but that's really made afterwards. But I wasn't surprised by so much, because pretty much everything we shot was up on the screen. There wasn't like a big radical cut or anything like that.
What about the ending sequence with the montage?
The ending sequence,
What did you think about?
I knew some of those elements. For example, before I started, it's very brief, but it was fun. Before I started, my parents who are quite elderly. My mother's 90 and my father's 94. And I went down to Florida to see them, because I never know. I get busy and I never know how long things are going to keep on going, okay? So I saw them, and I took my iPhone with me, and I interviewed them. And we ended up using them in the movie. Particularly my mother. There's a beautiful, and she's quite, she's got Alzheimer's, so she's a special person. I asked her what she would do if, I explained the premise of the movie, and I got an answer, and I filmed her for a long time. But there's just a little sequence of her and Abel flew an image of her. It flies around and then lines up with my face and then melts onto my face.
That's nice. Yeah.
I think you don't notice it so much, but for me that was very moving. Also, my father is used on the iPhone in one sequence when he's talking about the blame of who's to blame for the end of the world, which is kind of sweet.